Good morning. I have received a few requests about recipes that we make in the kindergarten classroom, which I, of course, want to share with all of you. But I thought it might be helpful for some who may not be familiar with bread baking if I do a short demonstration on how to make bread so that you can make our kindergarten pretzels at home with your child during this time that we're not at school. So, the first thing that we're going to do is start the yeast. This is a yeasted bread recipe, and so you'll need 1 cup of warm water. I'm going to use 1 tablespoon of yeast. And our yeast likes a sweet treat, and so about 2 tablespoons of honey will be plenty to make our yeast happy. And you can make this recipe vegan because sugar or maple syrup will also do just fine for our yeasties. And we want to add a little bit of olive oil to the mix too, and that's about 2 tablespoons as well. I add enough to get kind of a nice golden bubble on top of the mixture. And then stir it all together. You have to let that sit anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. It'll start to get frothy on the top. And I have one that I already started, so I can show you what that looks like in just a minute. But before we continue on with the yeast, we'll get our flour ready. I like to use a nice big mixing bowl so that there's plenty of room for the flour and the flour stays in the bowl instead of all over the table. So while the yeast is bubbling away, we're going to get our flour ready. Now, you do not need a sifter for this recipe. The children really like sifting the flour, so I do use a sifter for the recipe, and it's a good way to involve the children in the making of the pretzels, but of course, you know, they can do all of the mixing of the yeast and everything as well. So give it a little turn, and you can see it's just, it really is lovely. We're going to use 2 cups of flour. A lot of the baking that I learned to do was from my mother. She was a baker of amazing pies. And so I have many memories of my mom preparing and rolling out pie dough. And I like to think that maybe through all of this, you get to make some lovely memories with your children, and your children can remember back to making bread at home. Okay, so we've sifted the flour. Now we're going to add a little bit of salt. About half a teaspoon of salt should be fine for this little batch of pretzels. Our yeast has gotten quite bubbly, and we are ready to add it into the flour. I'm just going to give it a little stir to incorporate the salt through the rest of the flour and make a little bit of a well in the middle of the flour, and you can kind of see that. Get that back in there. And then pour in our yeast mixture. And then I am going to give it a turn and mix it together. Our bakers are baking sweet pretzels. All right. Now here comes the part that the children really like to help with, and that's the kneading. It's such, now put a little flour on the table. It's such a good activity for those fine motor skills, and it's such a nice sensory activity. So we're really trying to activate the bread. And even for us grown-ups, this is a very relaxing exercise. And if your dough is a little bit sticky, just add a little bit more flour. Okay. So I'm going to put that back in the big mixing bowl for just a minute. You'll want to prepare a little baking sheet. Again, another really helpful thing that your children can do is painting the baking sheet. Put a little bit of olive oil in a dish, and you can use a brush, you can use, a little clean dish towel, whatever you have that can spread some oil onto the baking sheet to keep those pretzels from sticking. For just a moment. Now, we are going to make some pretzels. So, I'm going to divide my dough in half, and then I'm going to divide it in half again. And I'm going to divide it in half one more time. My dough is a little sticky. Just put some more flour down on the table, or sometimes we call it snow. Put some snow on the table. And I am going to roll out for you. You can make all kinds of little critters. You can make sort of our classic pretzel shape. Always a favorite. One of the favorite shapes is a heart-shaped pretzel. Again, this is a really good way to get our little ones moving their fingers. The younger ones they're going to need a little help, but so when I make a heart, I roll in the two ends, and then I give it a little pinch at the bottom, and we get a little heart-shaped pretzel. Of course, there are some other classic shapes that you can make, like snails. You can also, if you have a little rolling pin, let them have some fun rolling out the dough and making different shapes. They do fluff up nicely if you make something that's a little thicker versus something that's really flat. But for a snail, have a nice little snail shape. Mix a pretzel, stir a pretzel, put it in the pan, roll a pretzel, bake a pretzel, share one if you can. Make another little sleepy snail. All right. Now that you have your pretzels made, I'm going to paint the pretzels. You can take your little brush, olive oil that you had from painting the pan. You give a little olive oil brushing to each of the pretzels. And then most of our children like a little bit of salt on top of the pretzels. And at school we have a coarser ground salt. If you have that, that's great. But if you don't, I just have a regular table sea salt, and I'm just going to give it a little bit of a sprinkle. And now I'm going to bake my pretzels for about 10 to 15 minutes in the oven at 375. And so when they're all finished, we'll come back. And our pretzels are finished. I hope that when you make them, it smells as lovely in your house as it smells in my house right now. And you can serve pretzels with a little bit of butter, sliced apples, nuts or raisins, whatever you have. And oh, they're even still a little bit steamy. I hope you enjoy pretzel making. Thank you.